Hey, what's going on, everyone? It's the one and only, and I know, it's been a while. I was out in Europe with my girlfriend and we had a blast. We will be having my first ever podcast episode discussing the future September Apple event set to be right around the corner. But also, we'll also discuss of what tech helped us out a lot in our trip. I know there were some battery packs that helped us out tremendously. That way we weren't stranded. So do expect future bi-weekly podcasts on my channel. More information on that soon to come. But you guys saw the title. You guys saw the thumbnail. What we're going to discuss today is the Google Pixel 6 Pro. Now, it must be said, I am an Apple sheep and I am surrounded by Apple's products and their ecosystem. I happen to love it. But that doesn't mean that we should ignore some of the competition. Google graciously sent me this phone last year, and I've had a little less than a year to really get used to it and get my hands on it. And honestly, I'm pleasantly surprised with the Google Pixel 6 Pro. I would even say that it's a top contender for me to pop out my SIM card and put it into the Google Pixel 6 Pro. This is not a perfect phone, just like the iPhone 13 Pro and Pro Max are not perfect phones either. So without further ado, I'm not going to give you guys a fully fledged review because I didn't feel like this qualified as a review, but instead I'll give you my year-long thoughts on what I think about Google's flagship phone, the Google Pixel 6 Pro. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get that intro rolling. All right, guys, so we have a lot to cover, but one thing I do want to say right off the bat is everyone has had their own experiences and everyone has their own biases when it comes to the world of smartphones. This is not a debate on whether iPhones or Androids are supreme. This is just me letting you know that I am coming from the Apple perspective, fairly new to the Android universe and also to Google smartphones. What I will tell you is that this does feel extremely premium. It feels great in the hands, and Google does market this as their flagship device. They have other devices for sale right now, including the Google Pixel 5a, the regular Pixel 6, but this is the Mac Daddy. This is the one that is slowly wanting to set itself apart so that some people could maybe potentially switch over from the Apple universe. And I'm going to tell you my honest and very sincere thoughts about the Pixel 6 Pro. So first, let's discuss pricing because as a flagship phone, this is going to cost you a pretty penny. So the Pixel 6 Pro is going to start out at $899. So it's almost there in line with the iPhone 13 Pro. I believe the smaller Pro is starting at $999, whereas the Pro Max typically comes in at $1099 for the base storage. There is an alternative for the Pixel 6 Pro with less pro-ish features, a smaller display, yada yada. That is the regular Pixel 6, and that comes in at $599. So once again, the Pro is going to have just a bit more features, a much larger display. And to get started, let's talk about the display. So it first has a fingerprint sensor embedded into the screen, and it flashes a really bright light so that it can read your fingerprint. Now, the fingerprint sensor is a little bit finicky in my experience. It's hit or miss. I'm not saying it doesn't work. It's just sometimes it won't read my thumb as accurately as, like, let's say Touch ID on some iPhones. And there's not even an option for Face ID. You know, in 2022, especially being an Apple user, I'm so used to unlocking with Face ID just really snappy and very quick. So sometimes the fingerprint sensor here on the Pixel 6 Pro takes a little longer than what I would like. Now, that might be me nitpicking. I mean, it is just a fraction of a second more than what I would like. But as a tech nerd, you know, you're kind of spoiled in that regard. I just wish it were a little more accurate, a little faster, and to also just have the option for another form of biometric authentication. Now, talking about the display, it does have that curved glass, so sometimes off axis, it preserves the color temperature and everything else pretty well. I do actually like the curved display. It's really different from what we're accustomed to on iPhones where it's, you know, flat all the way across. So that is a welcome addition. Not only that, the display on the Pixel 6, from what I see, gets way brighter than the iPhone 13 Pro does, especially while being outdoors. So outside, it is as lively, the display is as bright as you would want it to be, especially when you got the sun hitting it and all of that. And so I actually have my 13 Pro Max right here, so they're about equivalent in size and weight, more or less, but as you can see, they have varying design languages. The main one, if you look at the back, is that visor. So this is the first time Google in a very long while has decided to upgrade its camera hardware. So as you can see here, Apple has that square over at the top left corner, but Google opted for the visor design, and you're gonna have a lot of cool hardware in there. So for a long time, Google has been known for having excellent computational photography, but it was starting to lack a little bit in terms of the hardware compared to the competition. But not anymore. Now they have a massive 50 megapixel main sensor that's not really 50 megapixel. It's actually condensing 4 different images, quad band or something like that. But it's there. It's on paper. It's a 50 megapixel camera. You also have a 12 megapixel ultra wide sensor for those really nice ultra wide shots, especially when you're talking about scenery, taking photos of street views and stuff like that. And the Pro phone gets a 4 times telephoto camera, which is always welcome, especially when dishing out $900 for a device. So that's its main selling point. The camera on the Google Pixel 6 Pro are phenomenal. Now here's the thing. The pictures on the Google Pixel 6 are exceptional. Do they rival the iPhones? I don't think this is the precise video to make. If you guys would like to see a camera comparison in the future, I'll be more than happy to put shots side by side. From my experience, this Google Pixel 6 Pro can take 10 out of 10 photos, but sometimes it feels like it's too photoshopped, if that makes any sense. Obviously, Google has its own computational photography, and the software is there to improve the image quality. But some of the images sometimes look almost fake, if you will. I'm not saying Photoshop was made on the Google 6. What I'm saying is it's a similar feel. Sometimes you take a picture and it'll sharpen it up way too much where it doesn't even look real anymore. Whereas the iPhone 13 Pro takes 9 out of 10 photos almost 100% of the time. So while this one can take some really exceptional shots, sometimes I feel like things may be too oversaturated, especially when taking some video and pictures. You'll notice that there's a lot of grain, there's a lot of noise when you're trying to take the picture or the video, but then you go and look at it in your camera roll and it's fine. So I don't know what's going on there. I think especially for a professional like myself, recording on the Google Pixel 6 Pro, seeing all that noise was just really unwelcoming to me. I didn't really like it. And the videography and photography on the Apple iPhone 13 Pro is more consistent. But once again, the Pixel 6 Pro can take superb images. They're just few and far between, and it's just not as consistent as the camera on the Pro Max. Now, all over Google's marketing and even on their commercials, the biggest feature that they tout for the Google Pixel 6 Pro is the Magic Eraser. And I'm not gonna lie, it's pretty crazy. So if you've been living under a rock and don't know what that is, you basically take an image and there might be someone photobombing your image. It's bound to happen. It happens all the time. You're trying to take a nice picture with the sunset and there's someone in the background. Well, with the Magic Eraser, it uses the computational photography and AI, and it's really simple. All you do is, you hover around it, you circle around the object that you want removed, give it about 2 seconds, and 9 times out of 10, it does a phenomenal job on removing that subject and then blending everything else in to fit in accordingly. Sometimes it's not perfect, it is in its infancy, but it is a feature that does set Google's phones apart from the rest of the competition, and I think it's really neat. I feel like I've used Magic Eraser plenty of times before using this phone, and it's just a really nifty feature to have. You can, of course, do the same thing on Photoshop or Lightroom, but see, the thing is that when it's so easy to do straight off of the phone, it just makes it a very compelling option for a lot of people who do like to use their smartphones for photographs. And so what's driving all of this computational photography and everything else under the hood is Google's new Tensor chip, which is their in-house chip, similar to how Apple has their A14 chip, A15, and their M1, M2 chip. So it's very similar. This is going to allow Google engineers to really start tweaking and redefining not only the OS, but a lot of the cool features like I mentioned with the Magic Eraser. And speaking of, that Tensor chip also really does preserve battery quite well. What's cool is that that chip will adapt your battery usage so that over time your battery does learn your habits and it just learns to preserve power a lot better over the long run. A lot of people jumped the gun when they first got the Google Pixel 6 Pro and everyone said that the battery was horrible. I honestly can use this for a full day. And by the end of the night, so let's say I start my day at 7 a.m., by around 9 p.m., I might be on 20%, 30%, which is what I typically expect from my 13 Pro Max. So in terms of the battery department, it's nothing revolutionary. It's right in line up there with its peers. Oh, and another feature that's really, really cool on the Pixel 6 Pro is the voice recognition when typing. It is insane at how accurate this thing is. I could literally go on for 5 minutes just talking, and it's gonna pick up not only on every word, but the punctuation is gonna make it so that no one ever calls you out for having poor grammar. You already know how those grammar Nazis are. So I'm telling you, the Tensor chip on there is great to have in such a nice package. I mean, that voice recognition, like I said, works flawlessly, way better than Apple's. So for those people that may be driving and you might want to send a long-winded response, or maybe you have to explain something in detail, heck, my girlfriend's mom loves to do this. She loves to speak to the phone and then it'll type everything and send it as a text message or whatever. You will be a god with this one. I mean, it gets every single word down. And just like I said, the punctuation is even on point. Sometimes you don't even have to tell it where the commas go. It just knows. So everything under the hood, the processor is extremely strong and speedy. If I were to take a Geekbench of this, I'm sure it would score less probably than the Apple offering, but really nowadays in 2022, it's not so much about the raw benchmarks, but how the software and the hardware are used together to create a seamless experience for the user. And nothing on this device has ever been slow. I've never felt like, oh man, why is this lagging? Games play effortlessly. I've never had any drop frames. It's really up there with the iPhone in terms of gameplay if you do mobile game. Now, granted, I don't really play mobile games that use a ton of graphical processing power. For example, my go-tos are just Clash Royale and Pokemon Go. But if you're like me and if you do occasionally game, this one will do the job just fine. Everything about this phone is just really, really well-rounded. If I really were to give it an honest score, it's a good 9 out of 10. Is it enough yet to make me replace my iPhone 13 Pro Max? Probably not, but that's not the Google Pixel's fault. It's my fault. And that's because I'm just so invested in the Apple ecosystem. It's really hard for me to replace my iPhone 13 Pro because I have an Apple Watch, I have Apple Music, I have iPads, MacBooks, everything of the sort you could think by Apple. But if I didn't have any of that, then absolutely this one would be a strong candidate. Like I said, the always-on display is really good. My biggest nitpick is just the fingerprint sensor, but aside from that, everything else is really phenomenal. I mean, the camera quality is great. Like I said, some shots are just to die for on the Google Pixel 6, and sometimes are vastly superior than the iPhone camera. But what I will give Apple is that their pictures are world-renowned. For those that do own iPhones, know that the photography on the iPhone 13 Pro model specifically, it is really, really good, and it's very consistent at that. The Google phone, depending on your lighting and whether you're indoors or outdoors, it's hit or miss. Like I said, it's not to say that the photographs are terrible. It's just sometimes they're not bangers. With the iPhone, at least, you can almost expect consistent great shots. This one will take great shots. Everything just needs to align together perfectly. The lighting has to be right. The subject needs to be good. But it does have that magic eraser feature that is very, very useful. And the thing is, I know that Google will only improve the Pixel line. I've had a pleasant experience having this for a whole year. So once again, shout out to Google for sending me the Pixel 6 Pro. I'm really excited to see what they do later in the future. And I am also excited on their phone plan, Google Fi, which is very cheap. It's very straightforward. It lets you know all of the costs up front, so there's never any surprises. So I may have to do a review on Google Fi with the Google Pixel 6 in the future. But for now, my verdict is this is a phenomenal phone. It runs Android 12, and there's just a lot more customization. Now, of course, with the new iOS 15 coming out here soon, the iPhone 14 is set to be released, and it's supposed to have a lot more customization, kind of like the Apple Watch, so you'll be able to fix up your wall screen to be a little more customized to your liking. But Android is already the god of that, and I just think that there's so much you can do with the Google Pixel 6 Pro. And I think if you pick up the Pixel 6 Pro, even if you're on the fence, I say go for it. Yes, it is kind of pricey at $899, but it's not as pricey as some of the Samsung offerings or the 13 Pro Max because, again, it's $1,100, and that's just for the starting storage price. So once again, guys, that was just my thoughts. This wasn't really a direct head-to-head comparison to the 13 Pro Max, just setting out some differences about them, some similarities of the two, but I quite enjoy the Pixel 6 Pro. It's very refreshing, especially coming from an Apple user. It's just a really nice phone. It's the adequate size, at least for me, And I just love all the features that are included in this package. So guys, if you learned anything new, please drop a like down below. It helps out my channel out a ton. I am more than ready to take this channel to the next level, and that is 100,000. We are close to 57,000, and I really do want to get to that hump and that milestone very soon. So if you guys could help me out, share this video, tell your friends about my tech channel. I would really appreciate that. Drop any video suggestions you might have down below. With that being said, guys, I hope you enjoyed. Catch you on the next one.